right, I'm going to go ahead and start this. So I've been kind of playing around with my painting here, just continuing with the colors that I initially started off with. So if you guys remember, what we did was we created a pale yellow by just taking, I think I started off initially with just taking about 3 scoops of white and just a small dot of yellow and mixing that in there. So it's not straight white, it's just a really, really light yellow. Then I made an orange. I started off, I think, with about 2 or 3 scoops of yellow and a dot of red to make that. And then I made a red orange. And then I also have, in addition to those 3 mixtures that I made, I also have, you know, my white and my yellow and my red that I can use also too on its own. So essentially, when I started painting this, even though I only made 3 mixtures up here, I actually have 6 different colors to work with. So that's what I used. So that's what I did with this. And I'm just looking at my apple for all the answers, making sure that I'm showing sort of highlights where the light is hitting the strongest. So I'm looking for those glares or those shiny parts that are hitting the apple. I could probably even go in, especially on this one right here, brighten that up a little bit, and I'll do that later. I'm not too worried about it right now. So what I'm going to show you guys today is I'm going to show you how to do the shadows. So right now I have no shadows on the apple. Usually when painters paint shadows, a lot of times they make sure that they have a cool base to them. So the color that I'm going to add to my palette essentially is going to be blue. I'm not going to use black, okay? I'm going to try to do as much as I can without black, and if I need it, I might use it at the end, but my hope is I don't even need it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take some red, take a couple scoops of red. I'm going to put my painting off to the side here. So I want to make essentially like a dark red, which is actually going to be like a violet. So I'm going to start by taking about 2 scoops of the red. Very carefully try to just get the red. I've got some yellow on the outside of my red pile here. So taking a couple piles or scoops of my red, and then what I'm going to do, because the blue is the darker color in this formula, I'm going to take just a small dot of the blue and mix it in with the red. And this will darken up the red. And yes, it will have a violet tone to it, but that would be what you would normally see. And I want this to look pretty dark. I want it to look darker than my regular red pile, and it's not looking too much darker. So what I'm going to do for mine is I'm going to add just another dot of blue to it to try to make this darker. And again, I'm not adding black, I'm adding blue. So again, so I want it to be darker than just my plain old red. I'm going to still even add more. I feel like I need a little bit more contrast between my red and this dark red. This actually kind of looks like my favorite color, which is called alizarin crimson. It's like the best red you could ever use. It's a red that has a cool base to it, and it's great to use when you need to darken warm colors up. So there we go. That's a start. Now, is it going to be my darkest? Probably not. Okay. But this is going to be my start. So what I'm going to do now, most of my painting is dry, because this is what I did the other day. So blending can be a challenge just because everything underneath here is dry, and so I'll show you guys how I'll kind of blend in when I'm working on top of dry paint. But what I'm going to do first is just start painting this down where I think it needs to be. So I'm going to look for my darkest area. And again, I made this dark red by mixing my red with some blue. I did not add black, which is typically what most people would probably do if they've never been taught how to paint. What black does to your color is it kind of grays it out. It's going to make it kind of like a charcoal color rather than a dark red. And you'll lose sort of that richness in the color when you use black with your, or mix your black with your colors. So I've got that started. Kind of build this up a little bit. Probably have to put a couple more coats on that. I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to blend this out since I'm painting on top of dry layers here. So I'm going to clean my brush off. I want to make sure my brush is dry. And then I'm just going to take my brush while that dark red is still wet, and I'm just going to go over that edge and basically blend it out. So that's how I blend when I'm working on top of dry layers. And some of this is already starting to dry. Another way to do that, because some of it's already dried and it's not moving, is I'm going to go ahead and take my next lightest value, which would be straight red, and I'm just going to kind of paint it over top of this edge. And try to blend it out that way too. So I'm just taking some straight red and just blending it on top. And again, I'm sorry, it doesn't work very well with the video, but I do like to pick up my canvas, have it in my hand. I think it makes it easier to paint on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to just put this dark red wherever I need it, okay? And I'm going to need quite a lot more in this spot, not putting enough down. And again, the answer is in front of me. It's the apple. So if I don't know what to do, the apple should answer that question for me. All I have to do is just look. It's like all I'm doing is just copying. Copying what I see in front of me. So just building up this dark. Now, also, too, remember that at any point, if you feel like it just isn't looking right, the nice thing about acrylic paint is if you don't like something, let it dry, and then you can paint over it. So there's not as, shouldn't be as much sort of hesitation when you're trying to think about what to do and you want to take a chance. There's a lot less risk in taking chances with acrylic paint because, again, if you don't like it, you can just cover it up. And I'm constantly remixing these colors too. I've remade a lot of these initial piles probably 2 or 3 times. And again, I'm not making such a big deal that every time I remix these colors that I'm getting the exact match. That would be impossible to do anyways. If anything, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I can't get a perfect match on them, and it'll hopefully allow me to show more variation in my painting anyways. So when I grade your guys' apple, some of the things that I'm looking for, I want to see a value change, obviously. I want to be able to look at the apple and tell exactly what direction your light is coming from. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm kind of ignoring the top of my apple up here. I need to get this darker inside of here in this crown just to make that dimple look like it is kind of low, like it's a valley. To make that look like it's inside or dipping down, I need to get this darker. So I'm going to really darken that up and try to blend that out as much as I can. And that's what's going to make this look like it's kind of sunken, is making that dark right in there. My paint keeps drying up. Guys, you should be working, not talking. So just go around, make sure that you're showing good value changes. That your apple should start looking round by now. Should have full, pretty good range of values. I wouldn't say necessarily full. We don't have our darkest on here yet. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry a little bit. I'm going to give you guys just a few minutes, and then I'm going to show you how to do the stem, and then we'll see where we get from there. All right, so what I'm going to do right now, guys, I'm going to show you how to paint in the stem, or but also to make the colors for the stem too. And I'm not going to use any more colors than I already have on my palette. So I'm just going to use what I've already got. I want to make this stem, and for most of you guys, your stem looks probably pretty dark, but it's got like a brown color to it. Thankfully, we already know how to make brown because we've already done this for our background back here. Okay, so if you look at your background, look at your stem. I want to make a pretty dark, for a lot of my stem, it's fairly dark. I want to make a pretty dark brown. So what I'm going to do is just recreate that dark brown that I used in the background. And the way that I did that was that because I wanted it to be dark, I started off with just a little bit of yellow. So I'm going to start with a little bit of yellow. I'm going to add into this mixture a pretty good, I don't know if you guys can see it, a pretty good scoop of the red, because I want to make a red-orange. And right now that doesn't look red-orange enough, so I'm going to add more red to this mixture. There we go. It probably has something to do with the fact that I still have white paint on my brush, so clean my brush off. And then what I'm going to do is get a pretty good scoop, I don't know scoop, but a pretty hefty dot of blue here. I'm going to mix that in there and hopefully get a dark brown, which it looks pretty dark. I'm going to add just a little bit more red to my mixture. Now I need to add more blue. Got too red. And just another little touch of yellow to tone down the violet tone that I'm getting. So if your mixture, when you're making this brown, looks a little too violet, it means you have too much blue and red in the mixture. Just add a touch of that yellow to it. Remember, if you add complements to each other, they will tone each other down. So I want to tone down that violet that I'm kind of getting. There we go. So I've got a pretty good dark. Go back to adding more blue. All right. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and I'm actually going to wash my brush off because my brush is pretty loaded here and I can't get the paint off very well. So I'm going to wash this brush off because this stem is kind of small. So I need my brush to be kind of clean before I do this. So take all the water out of your brush. What I'm going to do is on the stem, I'm going to do the opposite I've done than on any other area. I'm going to paint the dark end first. So the same thing goes with the stem as it does with your apple and the background. My light's coming from my right side, so my lightest area on the stem is going to be on the right side. So I need to make the left side of my stem really dark. So pay attention to what direction your light's coming in. And I'm going to turn this canvas around just so it's easier for me to paint this in. You want to be very careful you don't go past the edge of that apple, right there at the bottom of the crown. Now remember, this stem is a natural object, so it's not perfectly shaped. So we don't want it to look too perfect, because if it does, it's going to really say, hey, we painted fake apples, which we did, but we want to fool everybody. So I've just got a little paint, and you might be able to see here. So I just got a little paint on my brush because it's such a small area. If I have a ton of paint on my brush, it's going to be really hard to paint this area. So I've just got it started. I'm going to zoom in so you can see. So I've just got it started, just got the darkest spot painted in. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go for just some straight red. And since this paint is still wet, I'm just going to kind of paint right on top here. I'm going to kind of use this as my transition color. So just straight red. That's going to be my transition. And for my lightest, I am going to use this pale yellow, if I've got any still left on here. I'm going to use this pale yellow that I used on my apple and use that for my bright spots on my stem. So I have 3 values on here. Now that I have all 3 of those values kind of laid down, I'm just going to kind of blend them together. I might go back and kind of use some of these other colors that I've already used on the apple, like this red-orange. And just kind of blend this stuff out. But it's such a small area, you don't have a lot of room to work on for this, so as far as blending goes, you just do what you can. Just going in with a clean brush. And I do think I might need to, because I'm kind of losing the bottom of my stem, I need to either make the area around it darker or make the stem darker. So I may need to use some black. All right, so I'm going to continue to just kind of keep playing with this. I need to kind of remix some of my colors here to help me just kind of finish everything up on the apple, or get it just at least in a good place. I want to get it to a point where I feel like I'm close to finished, but I may not be all the way finished. Just want to kind of just tidy some stuff up here. Now, we haven't done anything with our cast shadows yet, and we won't. We just want to get the apple in a good place, and then the next thing I will show you how to do is your cast shadow. Not just the cast shadow from the apple onto your construction paper, but your stem too. Now I do have just straight white on my painting, and it's just right here where the brightest areas of my highlights are. I'm just putting that in right now. I just have about 3 spots that I need to put this in, but it's just going to be a little bit. So I'm just putting those bright white highlights in there. All right, so right now that's what I've got. The apple still looks like it's floating because, of course, we haven't done the cassia yet, but that will be on Friday. So, and then Monday, you'll have Monday to just kind of fix anything, tidy anything up you want to before you turn it in. So, there you go.